Welcome everyone, my name is Jeff Smith. I'm a product manager here at Oracle on the database team, and today I'm going to be doing one of my favorite talks. It's normally SQL Developer tips and tricks, but I decided to turbocharge this because it's a very special event, and we're going to do database tools, tips, and tricks. So these are all of the database tools that our team builds, which I'll go over now. So we have SQL Developer, we have SQL Developer Data Modeler, we have Oracle REST Data Services, which is sometimes called ORDS, we have SQL CL, and we now have Database Actions or SQL Developer Web. So what we want to do is provide developers, DBAs, data professionals, really anyone that's working with the Oracle database, the tools they need to be successful in their job, have fun, and save as much time as possible. So that means that we're building command line interfaces, desktop graphical user interfaces, web applications, and even REST APIs. So what I'm going to try to do today is provide tips and tricks, 3 each, on all of these products. My challenge to myself is to do this in 30 minutes. That's always fun. And my challenge to you is to think of 1 or 2 of these that you can implement right away to save yourself the most amount of time and, again, improve your general experience with the database. If you want to take notes, feel free, but all of these tips and tricks I've documented on my blog, which I'll show at the end of this slide. So again, tips and tricks, these are, what's a tip? So things I think you should know about the product that you might not have had time to learn about by reading all the product documentation, or maybe you're new to the tool and you really just need some of that mentoring to go say, hey, try clicking here and try doing that. That's a tip. Tricks are more about undocumented features, things that you wouldn't know unless someone special showed you. And I'm doing my very best to make sure all of our tricks, all of our undocumented things are made official product features. So I think for this topic, it's almost 100% tips and not so much tricks, but people like the tricks. I'm not going to be doing any live product demo. We're going to be staying in the slideshow, and that's mostly because I've got so much to show for so many products. This is going to help keep me on point and on time, but have no fear. We will have time at the very end for plenty of Q&A, and I invite you guys to try to stump me at the end if you like. But the main thing, just sit back, have some fun, and let's go through these. So first things first, the granddaddy of all of our products, Oracle SQL Developer, debuted in 2005 as a query tool for working with stored procedures. We had the reporting feature that was added way early back in the day. It's a Java application, meaning it'll run on any desktop that supports Oracle Java. So on your Oracle Linux, on your Windows machine, and on your Macs, it should generally look and work and feel the same. There's some preferences you can set up to change the exact look and feel, but the features and the support across all of those operating systems is the same. And maybe the most important bullet point on this slide is it's free. So we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 million users around the world, and it's probably saved our customers several $1 billion in third-party licensing costs over using other tools. So it's also extended so much from being just a query tool. I mean, it's a full database administration, data modeling. You can use this for developing your REST services, tuning, security checks, all kinds of good stuff. I could spend 30 minutes just talking about SQL Developer. There's a link down here at the bottom you can follow to go download that, but let's get into it. So tip number 1, navigating the contents of your database can be a challenge. We have this connection menu on the left that allows you to browse objects by schema, by object type. But I find really the quickest way into that table, that view, that synonym, as in your code editor, in your SQL worksheet, simply just mouse over the text that represents that object. And if you're on a Mac, it'll be Command, mouse hover click, and you'll know it's working when you see that kind of hyperlink blue line get added. When you see that, just do a hard right click on your mouse and that will open the object. Now, if you've got a table already open and you're getting ready to open another table and you don't want that first one to go away, just make sure you pin your object. As you open things of similar types, they have a tendency to be replaced versus appended. That's actually a system preference that you can change. But again, this is probably the fastest way to open objects. In a SQL worksheet, in your SQL query, in your anonymous block, find the thing that you want to learn more about, and instead of hunting for it in the left side, just Command or Control click into it. So I mentioned preferences, and really changing up the preferences to meet your use requirements is the biggest tip and trick I have for SQL Developer. Now, there are a million preferences in here, and really you want to use the search window to find stuff. But a few things to keep an eye on. I like to disable Open Object on single click, which you can see here on this screen. That says, as I click on an object in the tree, don't automatically open it. If I want to drag and drop things into a data model or drag and drop things into a query builder, this option on basically turns that off. I'll change my default fonts. I will enable the zebra or the alternating color scheme backgrounds on my grids. And the last thing I'll do is I'll go through all the keyboard shortcuts and make sure I agree with them. But definitely spend a few moments, maybe just once a week, just picking a new page into preferences and saying, hey, I'm gonna change these up. Tip number 3 for SQL Developer. You can really double the size of the tool just by simply opening the database panel. Now, obviously you would need a higher elevated set of privileges in your database to access all these features, but there's a good chance that even a lot of these would be available to you as a normal user or as a developer. So for example, in the newer versions of the Oracle database, the SQL Monitor is available for anyone to look at their own queries running, and we have an interface for that. What we see here on the screen is the instance viewer, which is sort of a real-time monitoring window that gives you a general overview of your entire database. So what you'll see in this window is what you're allowed to see based on your data dictionary privilege views. But over here on the left-hand panel, we can see I've got items here for data pump. So I've got a wizard for doing exports and imports. As a developer, you might have privileges on data pump. This wizard just really helps you in a few points and clicks save yourself about 300 lines of typing to write out those PL SQL API calls. Another good thing in here is for security. You can manage your users, privileges, roles. And then another thing I like to point people at is the storage and the security. Additionally, in security is the auditing. A lot of people don't know we have a full auditing interface in here, so you can see who's doing what and when. On the table space and storage side, I know a lot of times people new to the administration gig, get flustered and they need to, easily add space to a table space, and we make it really easy with point and clicks. My bonus tip on this is if you're going to be doing administrative work in the database and you're using a point and click tool like SQL Developer, don't overlook the code pages that we include with all of the wizards. So if you're using the data pump wizard, for example, when you get to that very last page, you'll have a tab on top that'll say PL SQL or SQL or code. And if you click on that, it exposes all of the Oracle statements that we're about to send to the database on your behalf. It's a really nice way to teach yourself, the structure of the data dictionary, the command structure, and all of the different DBMS, PL SQL APIs that we use to manage the Oracle database. All right, SQL CL. There are a lot of people that get mad anytime they have to pick up the mouse. These are our bash buddies. So you're in the terminal, type, your fingers have this muscle memory. We're best friends. So in the GUI, it's one thing, but in the command line interface, completely different experience. SQL CL is having its 5th year anniversary, so it's kind of a birthday month for us here at Oracle. And what SQL CL is, it's a marriage of everything that you like about SQL Developer and all of the command line stuff that you like in SQL+. And we just tried to address some of the shortcomings that were there in SQL+. So some of the basic features that I think would be appealing to just really anybody. Automatic formatting of your output on the screen. So no more writing those call commands for every single query that you're going to write to get stuff to fit on screen. We automatically fit the stuff on screen best as possible. Query history between sessions. So I can come in and out of the tool and I've got access to the last 100, 300, or 1,000, however long you want to make it. List of queries and anonymous block scripts that you've previously written. So if you forget to save something off to a batch script or to a SQL file, it's probably there in your SQL history. And SQL history is smart enough to strip out things like connect commands that might have passwords in there. You can write your own custom commands. We have integrated VI and Emacs support, and we have total OCI integration support. So if you have an Oracle Cloud tenancy, you can set up your SDK, get your key setup in SQL CL can immediately start making commands to you into the Oracle Cloud using the REST APIs. So here's an example of what I mean by the automatic formatting, and you can also get an idea of some of the more fancier terminal support we have in here. So you've got syntax highlighting. I can differentiate between commands, object names, comments, numbers, text. I've got the option to have just a nice easy fit to screen, so I can see that the result set for employees is stretched across the table. But I've also got the ability to say, hey, I want my format of my data to come back as a CSV stream or even a JSON document. Now I can build that in as a command using set SQL format, and then everything after that comes back in that format, or I can actually add that as a comment in the query itself. So I can say select / CSV / from employees, and only the output of that query will come back as CSV. 7 or 8 formats that we support. The most popular ones would be delimited, SQL loader, inserts, CSV, and JSON. And then there's 3 or 4 more, even HTML if you'd like. This tip and this trick will actually work in both SQL Developer in the desktop and in the web. Tip number 2. So here's a preview of something we're working on later this year. We're going to be bringing in support for Data Guard. So for the broker, it's going to have, or it does have, a PL SQL API that was released in 21C. So if you're in a 21C and higher database, you're going to have access to some Data Guard commands. And it's just going to be integrated right there with SQL CL, which, by the way, is super easy to install. It's in the Yum repo. It's in the Cloud Shell and OCI by default. You can go to the website and download it without clicking through, without logging in an Oracle single sign-on. Super easy to get. It's about 35 megs, and it doesn't require an Oracle home, doesn't require a TNS names file. It has all the drivers you need to connect, and you just download it and run it. It's about as easy as we can make it. And we want to make the Oracle database experience as easy as you can make it. So here's an example of what some of the Data Guard commands are going to look like. And after that, we're also going to have data pump. So instead of writing out those 30, 40, 300, 400 line PL SQL blocks, I'm going to be able to say data pump export enter, and it'll immediately do a data pump export of my current schema. Now it's got more command options than that, and we've got a preview of what those are going to be, and we'll be adding more of those. And I told you earlier we have OCI or Oracle Cloud integration support. What you're also going to be able to do is say, hey, after you're done data pumping that file, SQL CL, reach out via the database directory to get those dumps, stream them down and up to my Oracle object store. So I can then immediately do a database data pump import. So we're really trying to make it as easy as possible to move data in and around from one system to another. Tip number 3, JavaScript. So this is a super powerful feature. This is level 300, seniors, master's degree level tip. If you are fond of JavaScript or even Python, you can write your own custom commands that interact directly with what's going on between the tool, the database, and your machine. So for example, with this little bit of code on my screen, I can tell SQL CL to say, hey, let's go get all of the blobs in this table and automatically write them out as files on the local machine, which is really pain in the butt to do with SQL and PL SQL, but really super easy. This is like, what, 8 lines of JavaScript. Now there's a library that Chris Rice maintains. If you want to just Google Chris Rice SQL CL JavaScript, there's like 2 or 3 dozen nice demo scripts that you can pull down and use to do some really cool things with the tool. This is the newest product we have in the product family. You'll see it in the interface labeled as Database Actions. We colloquially refer to it as SQL Developer Web. Either name is fine. You'll find it both places in the docs. This is a browser, single-page web app version of SQL Developer in your desktop, and it supports a ton of the features that I've already shown you in SQL CL and in SQL Developer. It runs out of Oracle REST Data Services, or ORDS. So as long as you have that configured on your database, or as many databases as you want, in a single click you can be set up and running in your database without having installing anything on your desktop. So if you have a fleet of business users that are going to be running queries, checking on performance, writing reports, developing REST APIs, working with the JSON document store, building data models or relational diagrams. There's so much you can do just in this web application. Database Actions or SQL Developer Web is where we're spending a majority of our development time right now. So every 3 months we have huge feature improvements coming, and these also show up in the cloud. So you have an Oracle Autonomous Database Cloud Service. It's built into that, but it's also available anywhere you can run ORDs. So really any Oracle database anywhere can have access to Database Actions. Tip 1, like I said, a lot of these features that I've shown in the previous slides apply equally across all of the tools. So just like SQL Developer Desktop has command and SQL and data dictionary, type ahead and insight advice, so does the web tool. And it's even the same keyboard shortcuts. So Control Enter runs, F4 describes, and in this case, Control Spacebar invokes the insight feature. And the insight feature is even more powerful in the web application. So it supports all of the database type stuff in SQL Developer, but it also supports text-based completion on what's already in your editor. So if you've already typed something out in your editor and you start typing it again, Control Spacebar is going to pick that up here too. Now I don't have this in as a tip, but here's a bonus tip 1A or 1B, I guess. If you open up the preferences and you click on the code editor page, there's several schemes available. And one of those schemes, I believe, is called dark mode high contrast, which is what we see here. Now this isn't application-wide true dark mode, but for all of the code editors, it's a dark mode screen. True application-wide dark mode is coming sometime later next year. So this editor experience is going to be the same no matter how you're dealing with code in the browser. So you could be in a SQL worksheet running queries. Here's an example of the command palette, and I've got to have access to the same keyboard shortcuts as well. So I can say quickly, hey, help me find this and replace this reoccurrence if I want. But not even in the SQL worksheet. I could come over into the JSON workshop, which is where we have our JSON document store support, where sort of like a Mongo system, you're not working with tables and rows, you're working with collections of JSON documents. So same built-in support in the Oracle database for that, and we make it really super easy and exact same editor look and feel and support there. Control-Shift-P will launch this command palette. So that'll give you a list of all the commands that you've got access to, and they should look pretty familiar to you if you've ever used VS Code, for example. And tip number 3, this feature is getting ready to come out any day now, or it might even be out as I'm typing this. This is how hot off the presses this is. We had a charting feature where you could take a query and display or visualize the results of that query as a chart. And what we wanted to do is allow you to take multiple charts on a common theme and shove them on a screen together, and we're creatively calling that a dashboard. So that's what we have on the screen now. This is my dashboard where I'm visualizing a lot of the different exercise data that I've collected with my Strava app over the past decade, and I've put it in my Oracle Autonomous Database. So I can see a bar chart, I've got line charts, pie charts, all kinds of charts. So I can set these up with refresh periods if I want, so they can, every 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds refresh. And I can also view the contents of these charts as the raw data. So I can toggle over to a grid view if I want to see the specific XY values. Here's an example of a data dictionary driven dashboard. So on this one, I might want to have refresh set up. So I'm basically saying, show me what's broken or show me what's what in my database. How many objects I have per type, how are my warnings and invalid objects popping up, and of all the parameters I have set, how many are set to default. So if with refresh on, these things would repaint on the fly every 1, 2, 3, 5, 30 seconds. These are all backed by Oracle REST APIs, and they're also secured. So you can create these dashboards and share them with anyone you want in your organization as long as they have the proper web credentials to access them. And they have never actually physically touched the database because they're all going through our mid-tier web server, which is ORDS. Also a new feature, and I'll be talking a lot about this going forward. Everyone likes pretty pictures, right? So here's an example of how a chart is defined. I have a SQL query that's returning at least 2 values. Most of the time you're going to be looking for a string and a number, but you could have 2 numbers on the chart if you'd like. And you're going to say, hey, this is the type of chart I want. This is the coordinate system I'm going to use. So polar does this weird, looks like the bottom or the top of the globe sort of thing. Cartesian's what we're most used to. And I can add some labels, and that's about it. And upcoming versions will allow you to change the color schemes, do multiple series on the charts. Charting and reporting is a very rich and deep product space. This is basically V1 or V1.1 of this, and so we're looking for feedback from our users. Tell us what you think about this, what you like, what you don't like what you'd have added, and I welcome anyone to reach out to me on Twitter, my blog, or on my email if you want to drop feedback on any of these tips on the session or any of the products. Okay, ORDS, Oracle REST Data Services. ORDS is what makes SQL Developer Web possible, but it's also a web listener for things like your Application Express or Oracle Apex apps. It's a replacement for ModPL SQL, but I'd say the primary use case for it is building REST APIs for your Oracle database itself. Your stored procedures, your data, your views, all that business logic you have coded into the database. The database is super fast, it's super secure, lots and lots of features available there. How can we make all that available to all of our applications and application stacks, or even batch automation processes? Well, pretty much any programming language, any platform in the world can speak the language of the web, HTTPS. All ORDS does is it makes the database available via HTTPS. Now, it does a little bit more than that. It also translates things to and from the web into things the database understands. So we can take a JSON document and say, oh, hey, this is a user-defined type being represented in this post request. Let's translate that into something the database runs. Let's run the stored procedure, get the output, and send it back down to the user with a 200 OK message. Maybe it's got a link in the header that they can follow, and more importantly, it's got that ref cursor or that standard output that the stored procedure itself is generated, printed in the response of the HTTP request. So this really makes building rich web applications super easy because you're taking advantage of things you've already built in the database. So tip number 1, if you know SQL and PL SQL, you can build these REST APIs. Now you might need to pick up some of the niceties of building things that follow the REST architectural style. So you're going to be modeling things in the database as nouns or as an object, and then you're going to be building APIs that perform verbs against these objects. And we expect HTTP status codes to make sense. If something is good, it's a 200. If something was added, it's a 201. It includes a link to the thing that we added so we can follow that thing. In the ways of the web, if I'm building an app that calls an API that returns 1,000,000 rows, probably don't want 1,000,000 rows returned to my iPad or my iPhone all at once. Wouldn't it be nice if those results were paged? So ORDS is doing all that stuff for us. We really just have to supply the logic behind the guts of the API definitions. So when I make this API call, here's the database work that's going to run. And so in that case, it's the SQL and the PL SQL. And so I could write all of this if I want. It could be a select star from. It's not going to be a super fancy API, or it could be an anonymous block where I'm doing lots of advanced stuff like setting up response codes and handling exception handlers with nice error messages back to the user and generating all the links that I want set up and setting up my MIME types. Maybe instead of returning a JSON document, maybe I'm returning a PDF being served out of a blob in a table. It's really, what you can do with this is limited by your imagination and, again, your knowledge of SQL and PL SQL. So here's me calling this API in a REST client. This is called Insomnia. That's a little bonus tip. I like curl, I like Postman, but for some reason I just find Insomnia more interesting as an end user. And it's free plug there for Insomnia. Thanks folks for making that. So I've made my post call. I've included my header values. I've hit go. Oracle takes that information off that request, figures out what you're trying to do in the database, does the work in the database, and sends the response back. In this case, it inserted something into a table. It tells me 201, and it returned a link to that thing we just created. And if I click on that, it calls another API to go get me the data behind that thing we just added. Now, the Oracle database is mature. It's been around for a while. You've probably got organizations out there that have 20, maybe even 30 years of PL/SQL logic that's been codified. And you don't have to throw that away for your REST APIs. And in fact, the opposite's true. You can take advantage of that stuff. We have an auto feature. You tell it words about your code or about your tables and views, and we automatically publish APIs on that. So it's really easy to modernize a lot of these application stacks. Heck, while you're in here using words to build your REST APIs, we give you some really nice dashboards so you can see how many of your APIs have been secured or not secured. You can easily click into any API and do the development work. You can generate Swagger style open API documents so you can see what's behind the API, what the user-based documentation is going to look like, and that also has a REST client built into it. And we also give you a full authentication technology available for the REST APIs too. So you can create OAuth 2 clients, have them protected with your web roles and web privs, and then no one gets to touch your stuff in the database unless you've given them the keys to use the client. Here's just a quick animated GIF showing the Swagger style open API documentation page, which also doubles as a REST client. So for any module or any REST-based object I've enabled, I get all of these features. And of course, I could also generate the code behind these APIs. All right, SQL Developer Data Modeler. Before you code anything, you need to develop your data models. And I hope you're taking the time to do this, and I have a masterclass series session, a whole 90 minutes just on the ins and outs of data modeling. But SQL Developer Data Modeler, also free, also saved our clients tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars over third-party pricey tools. I mean, this is built by Oracle to support the Oracle database. Full functional modeling solution. Now, the only confusing part with SQL Developer Data Modeler is that this feature is also inside of SQL Developer itself. So bonus tip 0, if you're doing data modeling on the side or just here and there, you're more than welcome to run it inside of SQL Dev. But if you're going to do a long-term project or you're going to have a very large model, I recommend going to oracle.com/datamodeler and downloading the standalone tool. The features across the two are the same, but sharing desktop space and sharing application resources isn't always the most fun. So tip 1, reverse engineering your database. You come in, you have no documentation on your project, but thankfully there's a lot of information inside your database. File, import, data dictionary, you connect to the database, you tell us what you want reverse engineered. We bring that into the system as a relational model. I've got my relational diagram here. I can reverse engineer that to a logical model and then generate an entity relationship diagram or an ERD if I'd like. It's probably the number one use case. People come to me all the time, hey, we need docs, we don't have any, can you help us? In SQL Developer, if you click on a table, you can get a mini version of the diagram right then and there. And you can click the little button in green to promote this from a mini diagram into a standalone model. This is the second thing I hear from people. It's not just that we don't have documentation. When we bring up the documentation, all of the pretty lines are missing. Well, if you haven't codified the business rules into the database with something we like to call foreign key relationships or constraints, you're not going to see these lines because the database doesn't know about them. You're not lost. You might be able to ask the tool to guess the conventions in your data dictionary. So you can say tools, discover, implied foreign keys, So this will run, it'll examine the primary keys in tables, and it'll look for columns of the same name in other tables, and it will infer that there's a relationship there and draw that on the screen. So this might be better than nothing. And maybe you get a smiley face. Tip 3, generating DDL. When reviewing data models, it's nice to look at the pictures, it's nice to look at the data dictionary reports, but I know a lot of people, they think in SQL, they think in DDL. So as you're pointing and clicking and doing all the checkboxes, if you want to know if you've successfully input the information you're trying to get across, one of the easiest ways to check that is to just generate the DDL. So you can select an object on the canvas, click the DDL button in the toolbar, and you'll get this pop-up window of the DDL. And then here's the trick. If you click on other things in the diagram space, it immediately refreshes that DDL so you can see what's what. Folks, I have great news. I've got a bonus tip from Maria Colgan, or as we call her, SQL Maria. And I thought it would be good to end on a nice practical tip for the database from one of the masters of performance in the Oracle database universe. And I asked her, and she didn't want to make me sad, so she gave me a tip for you folks. She's saying statistics are important, but it's not the most important thing to have statistics up to date to the current second or minute or even an hour. What's most important is that the statistics reflect your data accurately, so the optimizer has an understanding of how it's laid out and how it can generate nice plans to satisfy your queries. And she says specifically in terms of distinct values as well as the high and low values of a column. So with that tip, I give you one more bonus database tools tip. In SQL CL, there's the describe command, which gives you the describe SQL plus output. There's an updated version of that command called info, which prints out things like column comments and shows you the foreign keys. And then we have info plus. And info plus replaces the column comments with the column stats. And then you can see immediately how many distinct values are in per column, the low and high values, and if there's a histogram attached to those columns. So thanks, Maria, so much for letting me end this session on a real database tip and trick. Here's our summary. Our tools, regardless if you're using REST APIs, command line interfaces, web apps, or desktop apps, we're trying to make things easy and fun for you. And it's all free. I said I would share how you could learn more about the things I've shown you. thatjeffsmith.com. That's where I have almost 1,000 blog posts on all of these tips and tricks. And again, I just want to thank everyone for your time today.